In 2013, you did TED Talk.
Yes, I did. I did a TED Talk, yes.
Yes, and you showed the video and you were talking about this case of, you know, your father and a lion named Christian.
Yes.
Is that true?
It's 100% true, yeah. So in the 1970s, when my dad, or maybe 1969, my dad moved over from Australia with his best friend, and they were working in a furniture shop together when they decided, they'd heard a story about how Harrods had this incredible pet shop that you could go and buy any animal from.
Really? It was the case?
Yeah, it was the case. They were selling all kinds of animals. The story that got them interested was my dad had heard how a manager had taken a woman there on a date, and he'd said, "What animal would you like?" And she tried to be clever and she's like, "I want a camel." And the manager responded, "Do you want one hump or two?" So my dad decided, okay, we've got to go and check this place out. And they got there and they had 2 lion cubs for sale. And my dad and his friend they saw the cubs, and if they could have, they'd have bought them both, but they pulled every bit of their last savings and they bought Christian, who was a little lion cub who was maybe a few months old at the time.
A lion in Harrods, in the shop, in the city of London.
Yeah, and then they brought him back to their furniture shop where they raised him, and that's where he lived. So they had, in the basement, they had a lot of disused furniture, which was just his playground, essentially. Yeah. And they would take him for walks along the King's Road. They became very good friends with a local member of the parish. I think he was a vicar or something. And he had...
and a butcher as well.
Well, the butcher, yeah, he provided a lot of the offcuts because he went through a lot of meat, because they do. And there was a sort of a little park cemetery type thing. And they would take Christian there, they'd kick a ball around so he could chase the ball and actually have a run around off leash, but in an enclosed environment so that he was safe and other people were safe. And Christian was a sweetie, apparently. Like, he never hurt anyone, he never attacked any animals.
It's such a gamble, no?
It was in theory, but like, I think my dad said that they always had this sort of relationship of they could tell when he was showing signs of animosity, and it wasn't too often. There's actually a photo shoot, there's some photos going around where he's playing with some baby chicks. It was like an Easter shoot, and apparently Christian would sort of like push them around and knock them over, but he never tried to eat any of them because he was well fed, so he didn't feel the need to kind of like try and get more food.
Yeah, waste energy.
And so yeah, they kept him there. I mean, my favorite story is, so Christian he figured out he was abnormal. Like, he wasn't a normal, you know, people were surprised to meet him all the time. And so he would sit in the window of the furniture shop looking out to the street, and he would stay perfectly still. And then a crowd of people, or people would stop and look at him and be like, wow, he looks so realistic. And then he'd get up and move, and they'd all lose their mind and freak out, oh my God, it's a lion! Go and like freak out.
Oh my God, I would probably shit my pants.
And so eventually word got out that my dad and his friend were raising a lion in London. They weren't alone. Like, in the documentaries, there's footage of people walking down the street with cheetahs and things. They weren't alone. It was just so happened that Dad was a very personable guy, and they ended up meeting Elsa and George Adamson were recommended to them, and they ran a reserve out in Africa, and some people who'd just done A Lion Called Elsa, which is another movie about rehabilitation, and they put my dad in touch with them. And then, because Christian by this point was like nearly a year old, so he's getting quite big, and they were kind of aware of the fact of like, we cannot keep him here forever because he is a lion. There's a level of insanity we can abide by. And eventually they were able to take him out to Africa, and while out there, they went out with him for a few weeks, and they were hanging out with him. And they had a great time out there until eventually George Adamson, who ran the foundation, turned to him and said, like, look, you're gonna have to go home because he will never rehabilitate while you're here, because he'll just keep coming in and he'll want to hang out with you. He's attached to you. And so they left, and they got occasional updates, and then a year passes when eventually they start talking to George again, and they decide, like, can we come and visit him? Can we come see Christian? And so they fly back out, and then they went looking for him, and then there's the YouTube video, which is A Lion Called Christian, which shows the reunion, which is when Christian sees them from the top of the cliff and comes running down and jumps up and barrels into them. And the one Christian, in the video, Christian jumps up on Ace, who was my dad's friend, and nuzzles my father, because Christian would jump on Ace, and would sit on my father. So I think once my dad actually had to call into work and say, I can't come in. And they're like, why? Like, because there's a lion sitting on me.
And they're like, fuck off. Come on. You don't have to make up shit.
Yeah. I think luckily by this point they'd already met Christian, but yeah, there was a point. He was renowned for sitting on my dad, which, and in the video that my dad's wearing blue, I think, but that was the reunion, 100% exactly how it happened.
They didn't know if he will recognize them, right?
So I asked my dad the same question, because of course I think there's lots of like joke videos now of like people getting mauled. People have done various spoofs of it. And no, my dad said that him and Ace, when they saw Christian, they knew instantly that he was excited to see them and wanted to be friends with them. And there was no fear. They were like, it's our old friend, we get to see him again.
Did they keep tapping him like for like later? How, you know?
So it's not in that particular YouTube video, which is the one that he's most well known for, but he actually goes back again a year later. And by this point, Christian's got a proper mane and really looking like a real lion.
Yeah.
And apparently my dad described it, he used the analogy, it was like visiting me as a teenager, in terms of it was a lot of, I love you dad, piss off.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because apparently there is this thing that when, I'm not sure about girls, but I think when boys grow up, they start to challenge their fathers, like, and just in general authority of their family.
Yeah, the males will get kicked out of the pride because they will start to threaten the fathers.
But just even in people, you know, like happens.
If you ever find the video where they do reunite the second time, you can see Christian is still very affectionate. He doesn't jump up, but there's a lot of like affection, and then he'll move away and sit down somewhere else. And that was, dad was like, they got that vibe of like, we care about you, you love us, that's great, but also we don't need to be as involved as we were. And then if you watch the original YouTube video, towards the end there's an old guy walking around. He's George, he's the guy who helped rehabilitate the lions. My dad never was able to go back a third time because after the second return, George was shot by poachers. They came onto the land looking to do what poachers do, and George stood in front of them and said, get off my land. No, and they said, move or we'll shoot you. And he went, I'm not moving, and they shot him. And then amazingly, apparently, because there were a bunch of people who also worked on the foundation and on the grounds, every animal, every time, they all came back one last time, and when they realized he wasn't there anymore, or that he was gone, they never came back again. Yeah. So Christian went out into the wild. There is evidence to suggest he had children and they've lived on, because the average size of lions is now bigger than it used to be, because he was actually from I think originally he came from the Netherlands. Oh, really? Because he came from a zoo in the Netherlands. Yeah. Dad bought him in London, and then he was released to Africa. But the average size of lions is now bigger. But he never, as far as we're aware, he never turned up anywhere. Yeah. So he wasn't got by poachers. He probably lived a very happy natural life.